So the first lecture was basically a basic primer of what the anti-VEGF drugs are currently available in our country. Aflibercept has also been started, but still to come to our place. Now, with regards to the general ophthalmologist, I'd like to start with the basic injection procedure. Before starting the procedure, it is always better to have a drop of betadine in the eye, and then subsequently topical antibiotics, or in some of the cases which are high risk, one can even go for a systemic antibiotic. We can dilate the pupil. We use the pars plana route into the mid-vitreous, and the injection site classically is inferotemporally 3.5 to 4 millimeters from the limbus, depending on the status of the phakic or pseudophakic status. The injection procedure is basically that the conjunctiva is moved upwards, so that the conjunctival hole and the scleral point of penetration is not at the same point. So we have after the injection the conjunctiva is released, one can have a conjunctival covering on the scleral opening, and we try to go initially have a lamellar penetration, and then the needle is moved for a full thickness penetration, so that valvular mechanism still helps us better. And we have seen that with the examination procedure, if we have a lamellar or a valvular kind of thing going on for the injection, it is always better, because after 15 minutes the track of the needle is off in a valvular kind of an injection technique, direct rather than from a direct radial kind of a technique. The expanding indications, as I had just tried to tell you, was diabetic macular edema and vitreous hemorrhage, exudative AMD, retinal arterial and vein occlusions, retinopathy of prematurity, polypoidal choroidal vasculopathy, myopic CNVM, and central serous chorioretinopathy. With regards to diabetic retinopathy, the role of anti-VEGF holds well for diabetic macular edema, as well as in those cases where you have an NVE or NVD associated with it, because with the diabetic macular edema these things are also held back, and so the surgeon or the ophthalmologist basically gets time to do his laser, and also the macular edema component also goes down, so that is very helpful in subsequent laser. So an anti-VEGF therapy can be used in this kind of a situation where you have a diabetic macular edema, or in this kind of a situation also where you have a still more amount of hard exudates and hemorrhages. And once the anti-VEGF drugs start to work in the eye, in the next 2 to 3 weeks, the macular thickness starts to go down, and then the basic ground is set for a laser photocoagulation. So that gives a longevity to the basic effect of anti-VEGF therapy. It can also be used in a proliferative diabetic retinopathy, where you have a subhyaloid or some amount of vitreous hemorrhage, and the mild kind of vitreous hemorrhage or these subhyaloid hemorrhages may just dissolve and make way for a macular or a PRP, laser photocoagulation. Now, spectral domain optical coherence tomography really gives us a high resolution anatomic structure of the macula, and is very helpful in sort of proceeding for the case. Now, one of the criteria of DME on OCT which is being used is that in cases of 2 subsequent visits, if there is a change of more than 6 microns on central subfield thickness, one might consider that now the eye is moving into the macular edema kind of a stage, and one can then plan out to do the surgery, the anti-VEGF therapy and laser therapy. OCT has also helped us in defining the serous retinal detachments also, which are associated in very severe forms of the disease, or the cystic kind of lesions which may be happening in these cases. 3D OCT along with a superimposed macular thickness map really gives you a feel of the eye, that how the things are going in the eye, and that is, I believe, quite helpful. And here is just an example of a diabetic macular edema pre-treatment with the serous retinal detachment also associated with it, whereas after the treatment things have improved and the macula has flattened, and now one can proceed to do a laser photocoagulation. The N-phase 3D SD OCT is nowadays coming up very well, and this basically gives you a visual delight as well as the plane of knowing that which area of the macula has to be lasered. And so once an anti-VEGF therapy has been done and the macula has flattened out, then one can go in for the laser photocoagulation. So all these treatment modalities really are very helpful. And this slide is just trying to show that how there is an effect on the diabetic macular edema, and you can see that here the things are really bad, and this white area shows that the macula is very much thickened. And then after the anti-VEGF therapy, the macula starts to go towards normal and is trying to normalize over here, and is more or less normal after the anti-VEGF therapy. And subsequently, after a period of time, the macular edema and the serous detachment starts to reappear and the macular thickness has gone bad again. So this is just a visual impression that how the anti-VEGF therapy helps in relieving the macular edema, and once its time frame is over, then the macular edema starts to reappear again. So before this reappearance starts, you have to go in for the laser therapy, and that is really helpful. Here also we can see a case of a lot of NVD here, which has been relieved after intravitreal injection. Now, in cases of vitreous hemorrhage with proliferative diabetic retinopathy or proliferative Eales disease, one can give an injection of intravitreal Avastin preoperatively, maybe 3 to 5 days before, depending on surgeon's choice, and then the hemorrhage also starts to clear up, and the ease of surgery is also there, that during surgery the leakage of blood from the diseased vessels is not there, and so one is able to do the surgery very well. And so a preoperative use of Avastin in case of vitreous hemorrhage has really made the lives of the vitreoretinal surgeon much more easier now. Anti-VEGF therapy is basically contraindicated in cases of macular ischemia, because it has been shown that the ischemia part may be increased after this therapy. So in cases where you have a macular ischemia, one may try to not use this kind of a therapy. Now the recent results are that the DCR-NET has shown that the ranibizumab combined with focal or grid lasers generates significantly improved BCVA rather than laser alone or when it is combined with triamcinolone. So now the current kind of a strategy which people are using is to give an anti-VEGF and then going for subsequent laser therapy. So this combined form of a technique is having much more better results than a plain and simple laser therapy only. And bevacizumab has also shown the similar kind of work, that it works better than with pure and simple macular laser alone. In cases of exudative AMD, the earlier protocol has remained as a laser photocoagulation, and subsequently photodynamic therapy came. But nowadays it has been shown that intravitreal anti-VEGFs helps in stabilizing the choroidal neovascularization, choroidal neovascular membrane, and slowly as the membrane dies out, there is improvement and much improvement in the number of letters gained than with the control groups. off-label use of bevacizumab has also been found to be very well tolerated in these kind of patients, and we can go in for multiple injections at a monthly interval, and these have been found to be well tolerated, as well as to the pocket of the patient also it has been found to be cost effective for the treatment. Clinical trials for ranibizumab, such as the MARINA or the ANCHOR trial, have shown that there is a significant reduction in the retinal thickness and a greater gain of vision as compared to the PDT treated patients. And ranibizumab especially may be helpful where sometimes Avastin or bevacizumab is not working well because of its smaller size. Because ranibizumab is genetically engineered, it has a greater affinity for the vascular endothelial growth factor and is specifically formulated for the intraocular use. It penetrates well all the layers of the retina, and moreover, in case the ranibizumab leaks out of the eye into the circulation, it has a half-life of hours only, which is much better than the half-life of bevacizumab. So for this basic reason, ranibizumab could theoretically be associated with less systemic toxicity than bevacizumab. So basically nowadays we can practice that the monthly kind of a guideline, which is always an OCT guided kind of a treatment and subsequently retreatment, a 5-letter loss of with fluid in the macular area, more than 100 micron increase in the central retinal thickness, in case there is a new onset of the CNVM or a new onset of the macular hemorrhage, or if there is a persistent macular edema, these kind of therapies can be utilized very well, and if the treatment is initiated on time, the patient can gain and retain also very good vision. Retinal vein and arterial occlusion, previous protocol has been either observation or laser treatment, but nowadays if the central foveal thickness in these kind of patients is more than 250 microns, or the best corrected visual acuity is 612 or lesser, or if the duration is less than 1 year of this disease, one can easily advocate this kind of therapy, and this has been found very well for the central retinal vein occlusion, but it has also been advocated that it should be started for the branch retinal vein occlusion also, where there is an associated macular edema. Various kinds of trials have come up, and they have shown the role of this anti-VEGF therapy. Bevacizumab certainly holds well for this kind of treatment. VEGF trap has also been has not been approved yet for this drug, but is likely to have very good results also. So a timely injection of anti-VEGF may be given at the time when the patient is seen. The observation period may not be required now. Monthly injections is perhaps the best, or depending on how the OCT picture is happening. In cases of refractory CME with CRVO, these are really helpful in the treatment of such kind of cases. In cases of NVI, where you have a central retinal arterial occlusion, sometimes neovascularization of the iris may occur, and there also the anti-VEGF therapy has a role. So besides the CRVO and the BRVO, even in cases of central retinal artery occlusion, one may try this kind of therapy when you have a neovascularization of the iris, and then subsequently one can follow up with a pan-retinal photocoagulation, and one has seen that there is a marked regression of the NVI, and there is a good intraocular pressure control. I think more or less the part on CRO is that. For the retinopathy of prematurity, that is, there is an increasing indication in that. We have Dr. Subhadra Jalali also with us, who has a very nice experience, and we'll try to have or gain more experience from her. Previously, laser photocoagulation, or in some cases peripheral cryo was the management protocol, but nowadays people are trying to shift towards the bevacizumab also for treatment of this therapy. Bevacizumab in selective cases has been found to be effective for the treatment of ROP. The serum levels of VEGF have been found to be suppressed for about 2 weeks after treatment. Changes in the serum VEGF levels after treatment are important because VEGF also plays a role in the neurodevelopment of the newborns, as I had discussed in my first lecture. So in the mild cases, this kind of therapy should not be used. In the more severe form of the disease, it can be used. A few studies have shown there is a decrease in the refractive error incidence, which I feel might be coincidental also, or might be a part of this. There is no associated anti-segment ischemia, and this kind of a therapy can be used along with the PRP. PRP has been said to cause anti-segment ischemia, whereas sometimes one can say that intravitreal bevacizumab may decrease the neovascularization and may help out in such kind of cases. So the main concern still remains is because newer and newer trials are coming up on this subject about the compromised blood-retinal barrier and also about the doses scheduled. Usually half the normal adult dose is usually being practiced for these kind of cases, and I feel that there is a lot more has to be done on this before a full and final consensus can be made. For pathological myopia, these cases may be associated with a choroidal neovascular membrane, which are usually the classic form of the choroidal neovascular membrane. Previously, photodynamic therapy was being used, but nowadays one can easily go for the anti-VEGF therapy, and the treatment criteria remains is that in case there is a leakage of the CNVM from there is leakage of fluorescein from the CNVM, there is a subfoveal CNVM location, or the vision is really down. Both Lucentis or Avastin may be used in such kind of cases. And for the polypoidal choroidal vasculopathy, which is now being more and more being recognized in our country, anti-VEGF therapy is now gaining ground. Previously, photodynamic therapy was being used, but now a combination of PDT and anti-VEGF therapy has been advocated, which has shown much better visual outcome than cases of pure and simple PDT treatment alone. So in such cases, continuous monthly intravitreal Lucentis is safe and is well tolerated, and the polypoidal lesions have been shown to decrease. Okay. And lastly, we come to central serous retinopathy, where the role of anti-VEGF therapy is still in a developing phase, and I feel that it still remains sort of a dubious. Certain studies have been in favor and certain have been against it. Studies have shown that there is a significant change in the best corrected visual acuity in some of the cases. The mean central retinal thickness is decreased significantly, and it has been advocated basically for patients with a persistent form of the disease, meaning thereby that for fresh cases it should not be tried, but I feel as a sort of a last resort, one can say that one can go in for this kind of a therapy. The points against it are that VEGF and IL-8 were not increased in the aqueous humor and plasma of these cases, and a really true effect still needs to be shown. And here is just one of my cases which I had tried, and this is a classic case of chronic CSR, where you can see the proliferating photoreceptor cells and the proliferating RPE cells, and these are the main things on the OCT which show you that this disease is in a chronic phase, and subsequently after treatment the subretinal fluid has gone down, and so things. And here also you can see that the macular thickness has decreased. So I don't advocate as the first line of therapy, but yes, at the end of the day, if nothing is working on these kind of cases, and the disease has gone into a chronic CSR stage, then after telling on all the pros and cons, one might think, as this new vista is for the anti-VEGF therapy is developing. For Coats disease also, at least from my personal experience, in some cases it really works very well, and a lot of the exudates and things clear up well, but in some cases it does not do well. So from my aspect, I feel that still a lot of more research has to go into Coats disease to know that really if this therapy can help or not. But definitely the hard exudates, or that huge bunch of hard exudates, really do tend to go down with this kind of therapy in some of the selected cases. Thank you very much for your patient listening.